Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Retter 22. This watch is available from retterwatches.com for $895 on a pre-order basis. The Retter 22 is available in two dial colour options, frost white and lapis blue respectively. Retter Watches was founded 2 years ago by Deep Gosh. They design their watches in New York and they are manufactured in Neuchâtel in Switzerland. So this watch, both the head of the piece and also the integrated bracelet, are inspired by the design of George Hisek's iconic Vacheron Constantin 222, and one can clearly see the influences of the Vacheron 222 bracelet design in this Retter 22. So firstly, let's look at the travel case that the watch came to me in, and then I'll talk you through the specifications of the piece. So this is a pre-production prototype version of the Retter 22, and so it came to me in this hardshell travel case. However, I'm pleased to report that the watch isn't going to be retailed in this hardshell travel case. I understand that Retter are currently working on a hardshell genuine leather travel case, and there is a picture of that on retterwatches.com, so feel free to check that out. So with regards to the specifications of the piece, this is the Retter 22. We have a 40mm case diameter, we have a 46mm lug-to-lug measurement, a thickness of 12mm, and an integrated bracelet at the widest point is 21mm and it tapers down to 16.8mm at the 2-button push deploying clasp. The 2-button push deploying clasp is signed with the Retter brand emblem to a high standard. Good firm resistance to the 2-button push triggers, and both halves of the deployant open very smoothly. Nice attention to detail because we've got the Retter brand logo engraved on both the left-hand portion and the right-hand portion of the deployant. I like the firm resistance to the two spring-loaded triggers. Flawless brushed satin finishing to the top side, underside and flanks of the deployant. No extra play in the hinge pins, no sharp edges, no burrs. Both halves snap shut with a nice positive click. And I really like the feeling of it. It feels like a good solid clasp, and it's not going to accidentally deploy because of the firm resistance of the spring-loaded triggers. So for example, when you flex the wrist, there's no risk of accidentally deploying the clasp by pressing the pushers. So they deserve full credit because they have got this deployant clasp done to a very high standard. So with regards to the rest of the specification, we have a flat sapphire crystal with clear AR coating on the underside. The clear anti-reflective coating does an outstanding job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature of the silver mirror polished applied indices and silver mirror polished baton hands. The design of the piece is inspired by George Hisek's Vacheron Constantin 222, as I've discussed, but it also looks similar to Gerald Genter design from the 1970s, such as the Patek Philippe Nautilus and the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. One can see the design of the bezel does look like Gerald Genter design and also the head of the piece, but of course the bracelet is clearly George Hisek design with the Vacheron Constantin 222 style bracelet. I really like that 1970s Genter style bezel design. It really does look very aesthetically pleasing. Now, I just want to clarify something. There are some scratches and scuffs to this watch. This is a pre-production prototype of the watch which has been on tour. It's been loaned out to various reviewers and therefore they've worn the piece and tested it out because Retter Watches wanted feedback from reviewers about enhancements and improvements that need to be made. So as you can see, it's a well-worn example and there are some scuffs and scratches, but I want to clarify that when you purchase the watch, it's not going to come with any scuffs or scratches. Needless to say, it will have flawless mirror polishing to the flanks, for example. Now, as I've discussed, this Retter 22 is available in two versions, Frost White or Lapis Blue. Of those two versions, I think this Lapis Blue is the best looking because it has a deep navy sunburst blue dial, and as you can see, it's absolutely gorgeous the way the sunburst blue dial catches the light. They've made the correct decision by framing the date window with a silver frame which is mirror polished. It balances the 9 o'clock index on the dial. The symmetry and also the legibility of the dial are outstanding. They benefit from the AR coating on the underside of the sapphire crystal. I like the silver mirror polished Retter brand emblem which is applied at 12, and it's got just the right amount of information. We simply have Retter in white text, the brand logo at 12, and automatic. There's no unnecessary specifications such as water resistance rating, and I like the cleanliness of the design. It's not over cluttered or over branded, it's just perfect. I really like the symmetry of the dial. Now, one detail I really like about this is the watch is powered by the Sellita SW400-1. The 400-1 is a larger version of the SW200-1, which you'll all be familiar with. The benefit of using the 400-1 versus the 200-1 is it has a larger date wheel. And if you look at the Arabic numerals and the proportions of the date window, you can see it is larger than one would get with an SW200-1. So I'm pleased to see that Retter have used the 400-1 because it means they don't need to add a Cyclops magnifier over the date complication. The larger date wheel and larger Arabic numerals means one can read it and it can be framed and one can easily read the date. So they've made the correct decision by using the 400-1 with a larger date complication. With regards to the crown, it's a solid 316L grade stainless steel crown, hexagon profile, which fits the Genta style design, or alternatively George Hisek Vacheron Constantin 222 design. And I like the execution of it. So it's signed with the Retter watch's emblem to a high standard engraved. Let's test the screw down crown execution. Absolutely silky smooth, very satisfying. Very good interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. 200 meters of water resistance, which is a very impressive specification because this isn't a dive watch. It's a daily wear piece, and to get 200 meters of water resistance, really a strong specification. 100 meters would be adequate, so it's a credit to Retter because it is a thin piece. It's only 12 millimeters thick, but it does have 200 meters of water resistance. So pulling it out to the first click position is the time setting position. As you can see, one can manually wind the mainspring in the SW400-1 to top it up to its maximum 38-hour power reserve. Putting it out to the first click is the quick set complication, and that is the date setting position. When one rotates the crown clockwise, the quick set complication works as one would expect. One can feel the date wheel clicking over to the next day of the month. It feels exactly the same as the SW200-1, which you will be familiar with. The 400-1 is just a scaled up version of it, and it has exactly the same sensation when setting the date. Nice positive clicks. I like the positive indexing of the date. Pulling it out to the second click position is the time setting position. And like the 200-1, the 400-1 has hacking. One can hack the movement to set the time precisely to the second. So I've now stopped the second hand dead. We're now in the time setting position. Nice firm resistance to the 400-1. I really like the feeling of it. No back play clockwise and anti-clockwise in the gearing. It feels like a good, solid, reliable movement. I really like the feeling of it. It's a very satisfying movement to set the time and also to manually wind. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice solid click, and that restarts the movement. You can see the second hand begins to sweep around the dial once again. So let's test screwing the crown back down. Immediate thread pickup. This is outstanding screw down crown execution. It is perfection personified. In terms of smoothness, it feels as good as a Rolex screw down crown, either a twin lock or a trip lock crown. That is how smooth we're looking at. And Retter watches deserve full credit because they're a micro brand, and this is $895 US, but it's the kind of feeling one gets with a 10,000 euro piece. The screw down crown on this Retter 22 is 10 out of 10. Right, so I'll show you the case back. As you can see, the centre section of the case back is brushed satin finish and sterile, but we have Retter engraved and also the serial number of the piece. The circumference of the case back is mirror polished to flawless standard, and the circumference also has coin edge finishing. Very low profile, and it's very impressive because this is 200 meters of hermetic seal. And it also houses the SW400, which is a larger movement than the 200, but the thickness of the piece is still only 12 millimeters. So Retter deserve full credit because this is a very low profile case back, and it's still able to provide clearance to the 400-1's rotor on the underside of the movement. Very smooth, very flat, and therefore very comfortable to wear against the wrist for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. Now, with regards to the integrated end links, as you can see, the integrated bracelet doesn't use conventional spring bars. It uses two flathead screws. So in order to remove the bracelet and fit the rubber strap, which will be an option for the first 200 orders, one simply unscrews the two screws, and then one can withdraw the end link in the integrated bracelet and push it back in and then tighten up the two screws. I've tested this out. I've unscrewed both screws, and one can easily withdraw the integrated bracelet and slide it back in again, and it really does fit very well. Nice tight fit to the head of the piece, and it is a credible alternative to using spring bars because one doesn't need a spring bar tool. One simply uses a 1.2mm flat head jeweler's screwdriver. So the integrated end links work very well. They flow very well from the head of the piece into the bracelet seamlessly, and I really like that design of the Vacheron Constantin 222 bracelet, which is iconic. Right, so I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now, I haven't sized the bracelets. I've simply taken the watch out of the travel case and put it on wrist. I really like the nice positive click of both the left and right hand portions of the deployant clasp. It's done very well. Sometimes with deployant clasp, the resistance of the spring-loaded action isn't heavy enough, and there's a risk that they pop open when one accidentally presses the 2-button push triggers. But this one's got a nice firm click. It's loud and audible, which is satisfying, but also one really has to push it to engage it, and then it snaps shut with a nice loud click, and it feels positive. It's well locked. It's not going to accidentally deploy, and I really like the proportions of it. 22mm at the widest point of the integrated bracelet, gradually tapering down to 17.8. Retter deserve credit because they have got the proportions of the integrated bracelet done to perfection. Perfectly balances the head of the piece, so 40mm by 46. So this will fit you regardless of whether you have a smaller 6 to 7 inch wrist or a larger 7 to 8 inch wrist respectively. It's deceptive because although it's 40mm, it actually wears more like a 39 because it is very low profile. It's only 12mm thick due to the flat sapphire crystal and the very low profile flat screw down case back. So I really like it. I think the proportions of it are outstanding, and it really does give the impression of Gerald Genta design. It's like a Patek Philippe Nautilus or alternatively a Vacheron Constantin Royal Oak. It has that kind of design with the octagonal bezel. And I really like the facets, which are mirror polished on the bezel, and they contrast very well with the brushed satin finishing to the top of the bezel. It's just a very good looking piece. Feel good factor is outstanding, comfort level is outstanding. Now the thing to note is this is 147 grams with all the links in the integrated bracelet. As you'll know from my previous reviews, I consider circa 150 grams to be the sweet spot for a 40mm head of the piece on a stainless steel bracelet. The head of the piece and also the bracelet are entirely made from 316L grade stainless steel. It feels very well balanced due to how thin the bracelet links are. They're very low profile and slender. So 147 is a very nice weight. It gives a feeling of wrist presence and quality without being top heavy. It feels very well balanced, very comfortable to wear for long periods of time. So incredibly comfortable piece and very good looking from every angle. I really like it. The lapis blue sunburst dial contrasts very well with the silver applied indices and the silver mirror polished baton hands. So legibility is good, comfort level is good, feel good factor is also good. Right, so let's do a Lume test and we'll see how the Lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it has not disappointed. This is clearly BGW9 Super Lume Nova, and we can see that it's 5 to 6 layers of BGW9. It's clearly Swiss Super Lume Nova. It's glowing incredibly brightly, and it will continue to glow for a good length of time. Perfect colour tone match between the BGW9 on the applied indices and also the baton hands. I like that they've infilled the applied indices with 5 to 6 layers. They haven't used the cost-cutting measure of using 2 to 3 layers. And we've also clearly got 5 to 6 layers of application on the baton hands. One can clearly orientate the dial because we have double indices at the 12 o'clock position and single indexes at the other hour marks. Now, the only negative of having the large framed date complication at the 3 o'clock position is the absence of a index at 3 o'clock, but however it's acceptable because one can still orientate the dial due to the double indices at 12. Now there's a good difference in length between the minute hand and the hour hand, so one can clearly tell them apart. Sometimes that's a problem with using baton hands because the hour and minute hand are close in length, so one can clearly tell which is the minute and which is the hour. Glowing very brightly, and it will continue. In terms of performance, it's very similar to Rolex Chromolite or the very best of Swiss BGW9 Super Lume Nova, or alternatively Seiko Lumibrites, which are the very best Super Lume Novas in the watchmaking industry. So I really like it. I think they've made the correct choice by using blue BGW9 rather than green C3. and as you can see, the performance is 10 out of 10, so very impressive. Right, so let's discuss the movement used, because it's one of my favourite aspects of the piece. This is the first time I've reviewed a piece on my channel with the Celita SW400-1. So as I've detailed, the 400-1 has the same architecture as the SW200-1. It's a scaled up version, it's a larger version of the 200-1. It has the same 26 joules, and it also runs at the same 28,800 vibrations per hour and frequency of 4 Hz. 38-hour power reserve is perfectly acceptable. It has hand winding and hacking, which useful complications. Now, credit where credit's due. Retter are regulating the SW400s they're using in-house in 4 positions. And this one is running consistently at plus 2 seconds per day, which is actually within COSC chronometer limits of -4 to +6. Standard versions of the SW400 are only regulated by Celita in 2 positions. Top grade and chronometer grade versions of 400-1s are regulated in 6 positions to COSC chronometer limits of -4 to +6. So Retter deserve credit because they are regulating their movements in 4 positions, which is a good compromise between the standard or Elab all grade, which is 2 positions, and the top or chronometer grade, which is 6 positions. So 4 positions means it's very well regulated, it's very accurate, and I'm very impressed with +2 from a 400-1. The quality control and regulation is very good, and Retter deserve credit for doing that in-house themselves when they make the watches in Neuchâtel in Switzerland. So no negatives to the 400-1 whatsoever. The main positive that I've detailed, the main benefit is if you look at the date complication, if you look at the date window, you can see the 400-1 has a larger date wheel, and therefore it has a larger date window. The Arabic numerals are significantly larger than on the 200-1, and Retter deserve credit because they could have used the 200-1 in this watch, but they didn't. They chose the more expensive option of the 400-1, and it's a correct decision because they didn't need to use a Cyclops magnifier. One can clearly read the date complication. Also, it allows them to frame the date window in silver. Now, often when one applies a 3-dimensional frame around the dates, it creates a shadow on the date wheel, and especially if the dial's thick, because the shadow means that it makes it difficult to read the dates. But because it has a larger date wheel and larger Arabic numerals, even with a 3-dimensional silver frame around the date complication, one can clearly read the month. So I really like it. So I think that the 400-1 is an excellent choice for the Retter 22, and I would like to see more brands use it because of the larger date wheel, and it really does look very good. Right, so lastly, I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch meet 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price points. So $895 is the price point of this piece. It's available now on a pre-order basis from retterwatches.com. So really, to evaluate the piece, one has to study the quality of the finishing to the head of the piece and also the bracelet throughout. Flawless mirror polishing to the mirror polished bezel, and also flawless mirror polishing to the flanks of the case, which contrasts very well with the brushed satin finishing to the tops of the integrated lugs. Now, as I've detailed, there are some scuffs and scratches to the flanks to the head of this piece. I'm not going to level criticism at Retter watches for this because this is a pre-production prototype which has been on tour. It's been on loan out to various watch reviewers, and they have put scratches on the head of the piece by wearing it and testing it thoroughly. So needless to say, the watch will come with flawless mirror polishing to it. Quality of the finishing to the head of the piece is outstanding. Quality to the finishing to the screw-down caseback is outstanding. The thing that most impresses me about this piece is the Vacheron Constantin 222 style bracelet, which is an absolute masterpiece of design by George Hisek, and Retter deserve full credit for doing an excellent job of replicating or creating an homage to the 222 bracelet. This bracelet is finished to perfection. It's the kind of quality finishing one would expect to see on a high-tier piece from the Holy Trinity, such as the Patek Philippe Nautilus or alternatively the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. That's the level of finishing we're looking at. No sharp edges, no burrs, it doesn't pull arm hairs, flawless mirror polishing to the flanks, and we've also got 1.2mm screw pins rather than using the cross-cutting measure of push pins in the bracelet. Now, I understand that Retter aren't satisfied with the bracelet, even though I consider it to be excellent. They are looking to improve it even further by making the bracelet more flexible, so they're going to improve the articulation. The other thing they're going to do to enhance it in production models is they're going to add half links either side of the deploying clasp, because currently it only has full-size links. And therefore that means it's more difficult to size it to get the perfect size. Sometimes with a full link bracelet it's hard to get the perfect fit because removing a full link or adding a full link doesn't give the correct size. Half links mean one can fine tune it in the absence of micro adjustments with a deploying clasp. So I really like that. They're relentless pursuit of perfection, because I think this bracelet is good enough. I think it's excellent in terms of finishing, in terms of beautiful luster to the 316L grade stainless steel. It's just absolutely gorgeous the way it catches the light, and the mirror polishing is outstanding, no sharp edges to it. It feels invisible on wrist. It really feels like a strap. That's how comfortable it is. So the production models are going to be made more flexible, and they're also going to have half links, and that really will take it to the next level. So yes, I consider it to be excellent quality, and yes, I consider it to be excellent value at $895. This is a quality Swiss-made piece, made in Neuchâtel in Switzerland, using a quality Swiss-made movement. The SW400-1 is well respected. So I'm going to declare it a champagne watch for lemonade money. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Retter 22. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.